Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and by frequent request, we're diving back into comics with a look at DCeased. Created by Tom Taylor, DCeased is an amazing 6-part miniseries about the end of the world, and is essentially DC's answer to Marvel zombies. We pick up with a narration from Lois Lane, no doubt inspired by aliens. My mother used to tell me there was no such thing as monsters. There was nothing hiding in the dark. Nothing was going to jump out of the shadows. I wish I could have told my child the same thing. But by the time I was grown, I'd seen too many monsters. I knew they were real. We then see the end result of an invasion attempt from the planet Apocalypse, one where Darkseid appears to have been defeated by the Justice League. There's Superman, Batman, Hal Jordan, Hawkgirl, Nightwing, Green Arrow, Black Lightning, Aquaman, Flash, Black Canary, and Wonder Woman, who's strangling Darkseid with the lasso of truth. Lois tells us the sound of thunder could be heard emanating from Superman breaking the jaw of a god. The invasion lasted a week. The Justice League battled tirelessly for everyone. They kept most of the fighting to unpopulated areas, saved millions and repelled legions of parademons. It was perhaps the League's finest hour, but also their last together. Superman then orders Darkseid to leave. Batman tells him he will not return, while Wonder Woman barks at him to say it, as the lasso compels him. It's here that Darkseid removes the lasso from his neck with ease and tells them, "I will not return. I have no need, for the truth is, I have what I came for," before opening a boom tube and disappearing, meaning this entire conflict had actually been a ruse all along. The group are puzzling over what just happened when Batman gets a notification that Cyborg is missing. Black Lightning tells the group that he saw him chasing parademons out of Metropolis, but Bruce explains that he isn't on Earth. Flash asks how he could possibly know that, and Batman admits he had a tracker on him, as he was essentially a walking weapon with tech from Apocalypse that they barely understood. They're obviously all a bit annoyed that he doesn't trust them, but in truth, Batman doesn't trust anybody. Flash then asks if he was also tracking them, and Batman pauses before saying no, with the brief silence implying that he was indeed tracking every one of them. And of course we know from the JLA Tower of Babel by Mark Waid that not only is he tracking them, but he also has safeguards in place to take them out if they ever went bad. This obviously backfired when Ra's al Ghul stole Batman's notes and used them to defeat the JLA in a coordinated attack that exploited their vulnerabilities. Regardless, Batman explains his tracking system had a 2 light-year reach, meaning, based on his readings, Cyborg isn't even in their solar system. While the Justice League scratch their heads, we head to Apocalypse and learn about Cyborg's fate. For a bit of context, Jack Kirby's Fourth World Saga destroyed the old gods and created 2 planets for the new gods, New Genesis, which would be ruled by Highfather, and Apocalypse, ruled by Darkseid. The 2 planets are essentially separated from the rest of the universe, and are only accessible by boom tube. Locked inside an eternal struggle, it should also be noted that Highfather and Darkseid are both looking for the anti-life equation to destroy the other. Impaling Cyborg to an operating table, one of Darkseid's loyal followers named Assad asks if he knows about the anti-life equation. Now, the anti-life equation is basically a mathematical formula that obliterates free will, allowing the wielder calculating the result to completely dominate the will of others, which is why every incarnation of Darkseid is obsessed with finding it. Darkseid explains that Darkseid already found half of the anti-life equation, and believed the other half would manifest on Earth. Pulling Cyborg close for examination, he releases him and exclaims that he was right and had indeed found it. Cyborg asks where it was, and Darkseid appears out of nowhere with a mother box in his hand and says, "In you." Demonstrating he was in no laughing mood, when Cyborg tries to make a joke about his entrance, Darkseid orders the torturer to remove his tongue. Darkseid explains the mother box will add their half of the equation to his system, but that there was a major problem. Merging the anti-life equation with the digital and physical components of Cyborg will likely kill him, destroying the equation in the process. Darkseid simply indicates this was a minor inconvenience, and that all they had to do was control his end, and with that, he summons Death as the mother box begins merging with Cyborg. When the Black Racer appears, who's the physical manifestation of Death, Darkseid then grabs him by the head and says that he needs him. Darkseid then begins draining Death and injecting it into Cyborg, corrupting the anti-life equation, which in turn corrupts Darkseid, who begins to lose his mind. And as they saw Darkseid lose himself to corruption, Darkseid sent Cyborg away, but it was too late. Their infected ruler was now a slave to a new anti-life equation. Punching a hole in Death, Darkseid leapt into the fires of Apocalypse, into the world core, and unleashed an energy blast that obliterated his planet. Picking up at Metropolis, Cyborg arrives through a boom tube, and we're told that as soon as he returned to Earth, his system was automatically online, and the anti-life equation leapt from its patient zero to the internet. He tried to firewall himself and cut off his technology to the world, but the damage was done. The anti-life equation began to spread as a techno-organic virus. It attacked through social media, and through its half-human, half-man conduit, it infected the minds of all who saw it. The infected then mindlessly shared the equation to friends and family. As the corruption took hold, the desperate and scared tried to tear the equation from their head, and just like that, they were enslaved. Here I think it's important to note that the anti-living are neither alive nor dead, but appear to be driven solely by their desire to spread more anti-life by either killing or infecting any other living thing they could find. But now, any digital device connected to the internet would also corrupt, allowing it to rapidly infect the world. From here, things begin to pick up pace as the infection begins to spread exponentially. Unaware of what is currently happening, Superman is at the home of Scott-Free and Big Barda, trying to recruit them to rescue Cyborg from Apocalypse. Of course, being new gods, with Barda born on the planet and Scott having escaped Apocalypse a number of times, they would be perfect for a rescue mission, but there's no Apocalypse, and Cyborg is much closer than they realize. Thanking them for agreeing to help, Superman then asks if they can hear the screaming as he leaps out the window. He then reaches the middle of the city and is horrified to realize the entire world is now screaming. At their home, Jonathan is playing a game with Damian Wayne when Lois asks if he could locate a buzzing phone. Using his X-ray vision, he spots it in no time and reaches for it when the phone explodes. Superman then smashes through the window and uses his heat vision to also destroy the television, telling them not to look at any of the screens. We then meet Batman in Gotham, who, as to be expected, is already working on a solution. The moment he caught wind of what was happening, he got the Bat computer to quarantine the virus, implement firewalls, and make sure all systems were running on the local intranet. Using the backup analog camera system he installed, he sees the city he spent his entire life trying to protect in flames. He gets the computer to run projections based on average phone, tablet, and PC use, taking into account different variables like time zones, and is horrified to discover there were already 600 million people infected worldwide. Worse still, at the current exponential rate of dissemination, it predicts the virus will spread to every internet-connected device within days, infecting billions. Believing the computer implemented firewalls across the entire compound and not just the Batcave, Batman quickly checks to make sure the connection has been disabled in the mansion, and is shocked to learn that wasn't the case. With that, he immediately activates an EMP burst in the manor, taking out the electronics, but we're gonna find out that he was too late. Picking back up with the Kents and Damian, Superman tells Lois that he needs to assemble the League. Damian also explains that his father is not answering on the radio. Now, it's important to note that Damian is one of the most prodigious fighters in the world, who, like his father, does not show any emotion. But here he feels utterly hopeless. Lois tries cheering him up, saying that if there's anybody that could intimidate a virus, it's Batman. And she's not wrong. Of course, his best friend also chimes in, jokingly saying that his father is not one to be found on social media. Superman also assures Damian that Bruce will have a contingency in place, and that the end of the world won't stop him from reaching his son. And that is for the most part true. Batman's biggest power is that his contingencies have contingencies up their sleeves, wrapped up in backup plans, but this is one scenario he never anticipated. We find Batman running through the mansion, calling for Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, and Alfred, to find the latter calling his name from one of the rooms. When he enters, Alfred is fending off an infected Nightwing, and while we don't see Robin, Alfred tells him that they're both in here. Not wanting to fight what he considered to be one of his sons, he tells Nightwing to stop as he didn't want to hurt him, and filled with anti-Laphetic intent, the red-eyed Nightwing jumps at him as Robin approaches from the side. Now, under normal circumstances, Batman would take these two out instantly. The issue here is that all it takes is for one scratch, one bite to infect a person, and that's exactly what happens here. As Bruce prepares to land another punch on Nightwing, Robin bites his hand, infecting him, and realizing that he was done for, Bruce implores Alfred to just run. As he does, Nightwing takes advantage of his distracted state and takes a huge chunk out of his neck. And that is seemingly the end of Batman. Or is it? Heading to the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, we get our first glimpse of Aquaman in this alternate Earth story. Noticing a vessel that appears to be in trouble, he approaches and asks if anyone was there. This is a multi-layered endeavor. Being half human and a member of the Justice League, of course he's here to help first and foremost, but as the King of Atlantis, in the event that he had to choose between humans and his people, he will no doubt choose the ocean, so he's a bit annoyed to see all these tankers in the water. Regardless, as he steps on board and calls out to see if anyone else was there, he sees a broken phone on the floor and hears the sound of animals screeching inside. Of course, when he opens the door, it's a complete madhouse. Every single person on board has been infected, and while they'd been contained inside, the sheer number of them overwhelm Aquaman and pour into the ocean with him. Back at Metropolis, Damian and Jonathan are watching all the chaos destroy the city and wonder if it's Armageddon. Inside, Lois gets off a landline phone and tells Clark that her parents are fine and have entered their bunker as they never trusted smartphones. Thinking of his own folks, Clark tells her that he wants to go to Smallville, but can't leave them here on their own. It's here that Lois suggests that they head to the Daily Planet. While the whole place is probably filled with infected, they need a way to communicate to the world and find survivors, and it's implied the Daily Planet has high-powered analog communication equipment that will help them with this endeavor. Moving over to the underground of Gotham, we have Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, who don't appear to be aware of the outbreak just yet. Harley's about to enter a door, but after saying it was a terrible idea, she tries to walk away. Stopping her, Poison Ivy tells her that she's more than capable of doing this, and explains she'll be in the botanical gardens waiting for her. And so, Harley musters up the courage to enter, and finds the Joker in front of a few monitors, telling him that their life is over. She's essentially facilitating a breakup with the intention of moving on with Ivy, unaware that her psychopathic boyfriend was now a slave to anti-life. As we pick up with Hal Jordan, Black Canary, and Oliver Queen camping outside of Metropolis that night, completely unaware of what was happening, I want you to bear in mind that we've only really seen infected humans. Aquaman was attacked, and we're about to learn his fate shortly, but here Taylor demonstrates that even the most powerful of superheroes are vulnerable to anti-life. Consider what would happen if one or more of the Justice League with immense powers was infected and started turning on the innocent. I mean, in Marvel Zombies, we actually learned the superheroes would have been able to contain the zombie virus were it not for one hero that sealed humanity's fate. In it, Quicksilver is called by his sister Wanda in the midst of a zombie attack, begging him to save her. But when he's sped in from far away with haste and picks her up, it's revealed that it was actually an infected Mystique, who proceeded to bite him. The infected Quicksilver then spread across the oceans and infected people in every country, making it impossible to contain the outbreak. And that's exactly what we're going to start to get here. Hal Jordan calls it in for the night and enters the tent, turning on his phone for the first time that day as the other two continue talking. They then hear the screams of the Green Lantern, and as they call out his name, a huge blast of energy scorches the earth at their feet, and much to their horror, there appears the mighty Hal Jordan, now corrupted with anti-life and keen on spreading the infection. We hear the Green Lantern ring call out. Green Lantern of Sector 2814, lethal force is not sanctioned, but Hal seemingly uses his indomitable will to overpower the restriction and send out a lethal blow. While they both get out of the way just in time, Dinah is hit in the back by debris. As far as Ollie is concerned, Hal is one of his best friends, so instead of trying to kill him, reasoning that whatever is causing him to lose his mind can be dealt with, he tries to incapacitate him with a non-lethal arrow. Warning that the next one is going to kill him, he lines up his shot and begins to freak out. The reason for this is that Hal is trying to kill him with massive jagged spikes, but before the construct reaches Ollie, Black Canary is able to create ultrasonic vibrations that fry his brain. As they stand over his body, the ring calls out, Green Lantern of Sector 2814 deceased. Scanning for replacement. Replacement found. Dinah Lance of Earth, you have the ability to overcome great fear. Welcome to the Green Lantern Corps. Picking back up in Metropolis a few moments before this, Clark and Jonathan have flown Lois and Damian to the roof of the Daily Planet, which has an old analog TV system and a radio station that can be used to look for survivors and assemble a resistance team. Lois is eager to get things going, but before she opens the door, Clark uses his X-ray vision and realizes the whole building is swarming with monsters. Lois asks him if it's people they know, and the heartbroken Superman looks down and says yes. Right now, they don't know if there's a cure, and from what they've gathered, all is lost for the infected. He's just about to clear the building out so they can enter safely, when Clark hears the deafening screams of Black Canary in the distance, and so, telling John to keep them safe and not let anything through the door until he got back, he flies over to the commotion, to find Dinah and Ollie looking over the body of their fallen friend. She explains that she doesn't want this power, but Superman flies in telling her to take it, as they're going to need it. Flying back, they meet up with the rest of the gang who've made contact with Bruce. Oliver tells Batman that Hal just turned into a zombie and tried to kill them, but is told that they're not zombies. Bruce continues that they're not consumed by hunger and aren't feeding, but spreading death. He's already figured out that they're anti-living, bent on stealing life, and that the anti-life equation was the trigger that started everything. They all assume that he's okay, but he presses them, urging them to listen carefully as he's infected and almost out of time. He goes on by saying that he's wearing one of the suits of Mr. Freeze, using the cold to slow down his metabolism, thereby slowing down the spread of anti-life, but he's well aware that it's moments from taking him over completely. Standing behind him is Alfred with a shotgun and a somber look on his face, realizing that he was about to betray the promise that he made to Martha and Thomas Wayne. His greatest friend tries to console him, but Bruce explains there is literally no time for sentiment. He continues by saying anti-life is a technological hybrid that can be transferred through blood and digital imagery. This means that in order for them to save the world, Batman thinks they need to destroy any human carriers, satellites, and basically destroy the internet. Now, here's another important thing I want you to remember. With Oliver and Dinah jumping in on behalf of Damian, who's in too much shock to speak, saying that there must be something he can do to stay alive, Batman says something crucial, which we're not going to be touching on till the very end of the series. He tells him that there isn't anything he can do, but then also notes that it's likely his mind now doesn't want him to live, instead pushing him to embrace anti-life. Damian finally speaks up and says Batman. Of course we know he's thinking father in his head, but he's trying his best to keep his composure. For those of you unaware of his origins, he's basically the son of Batman and Talia al Ghul, and as Ra's al Ghul's grandson and a former member of the League of Assassins, Damian is a stone-cold killer. But he's also a child, one saying goodbye to his seemingly unstoppable father for the last time. Wanting him to be strong, Bruce catches himself before explaining that Alfred has something for him, something he always wanted for him, something he always knew Damian would earn one day. He tries to say that he's sorry he won't see him grow up when he begins to repeat himself. Damian finally calls out father and dad, but there's no response. With Batman reaching for his helmet in distress, Alfred calls out his name and is horrified to see the corrupted face of Batman smiling at him with murderous intent. Damian calls out to his father for the last time when Alfred ends the transmission and cocks a shotgun as Batman runs towards him. Alfred then takes aim and says, "It shouldn't have ended this way. Not for you. I'm sorry, son," before unloading a shot into his face, killing him, and with that, Batman is dead. What we see next is a broken Alfred standing over the bodies of Wayne, Drake, and Grayson, saying, "My boys, I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." And this is something that will continue to haunt him throughout the series. Is there anything else he could have done to save them? While he ponders this, he carries the briefcase Bruce wanted him to give to Damian and boards the Batjet, showing just how bad things were and how broken he now was. Alfred then flies over Gotham and begins carpet bombing the infected without remorse, in a completely out-of-character move. As we pick back up with Harley, she's being chased by an infected Joker, who in all honesty is no more crazy than usual. Deciding to stand her ground, she finally turns around and fires an emancipation round into his chest. But before she has time to celebrate her freedom, who should appear in front of her but the zombified birds of prey? While clearly outnumbered, she smiles and cocks a shotgun again, before saying that she was going to go bird hunting. We're going to find out what happens to her later on, but what Taylor does throughout is illustrate that the heroes are falling, and it's going to be up to both the remaining villains and heroes to stop Anti-Life, or at the very least, protect as many people as they can before the end. On the roof of the Daily Planet, John calls out to Damian and tells him that he's sorry. Of course, Damian tells him that he doesn't want to talk, and so John tells him that he understands and that he'll be sitting here beside him so he's not alone, in one of the many heart-wrenching moments to come. It's here that Superman tells Lois that he urgently needs to get to Smallville. Explaining that he's going to secure the building first, he uses his X-ray vision to identify everyone in the building that's infected and those that are not. Dinah asks if he needs help, but Superman tells her that he'll manage before flying off. Now, this isn't Clark being arrogant, but careful. After all, she only just became a Green Lantern, and it will be quite some time before she can master the powers that come with it. And while the combination of her ultrasonic power and the ability to create constructs ends up being pretty handy, we saw how dangerous it would have been if the infected Howl had torn through the city. So it's more Clark being careful about not allowing another person with superhuman powers to get infected than anything else. And so, using his superhuman speed, Clark begins grabbing his infected co-workers and emptying the building, trying his best to forget that they were once his beloved friends. He then grabs the globe of the Daily Planet and uses it as a barrier to hold any infected from getting in. Flying back to the roof, he tells his family the building's secure and says that they should come with him as Smallville would probably be safer, but Lois urges him that she's needed here. Jonathan is of course Superboy, and a more than capable figure. In fact, his courage is going to be absolutely vital to the survival of humanity in a way that you will never imagine. But after what happened to Batman, John is really concerned and asks if his father is coming back. Clark hugs them both, saying that he promised. But as we look over to Damian, we're reminded that such promises cannot always be kept. Telling Ollie and Dinah to keep his family safe, Superman then flies off to Smallville in search of his parents. Picking up in Atlantis, we find Mira attempting to train Garth, also known as Tempest. Mira tells him to concentrate, and as he tries, he tells her that he is, but what she's asking him to do is beyond his capabilities. She explains that he has the power to push against the tides, before joking if he really can't, maybe he should rethink the name Tempest to Mild Weather Event. But as they look up, they notice a darkness moving to them that is blocking out the sun. Revealed to be Aquaman is infected, and all the animals at his command coming through to annihilate his own people. As they realize the darkness was actually blood, Lois begins explaining that they had no idea what they were about to face. They lived alongside gods, and as such, came to rely too much on them to save the world. They couldn't fathom that power ever being turned against them. And while for the longest time, Aquaman has been the butt of every Justice League joke, my man controls the oceans and is not a foe to be trifled with. And that is a theme that will reverberate throughout the story. What happens when your greatest heroes are turned against you? As the darkness approaches, Mira spots Arthur, and Garth begins swimming up to investigate, only for him to ingest the blood and succumb to corruption. Mira yells at him to get away from the blood, but by then, it's too late. As the hordes of infected descend on Mira, led by Aquaman, all that Mira can do is briefly hold them back long enough for her to escape as Atlantis falls to anti-life. As we pick back up as Superman, we learn that although he was anxious to get to his parents, he couldn't ignore the people that needed him. Only problem is that with the apocalypse, every single person needed him. After rescuing hundreds if not thousands of people, Clark sees a helicopter under attack and finds Black Lightning on board with his children. When Jefferson explains it was an infected Clayface holding onto the chopper, they both use their combined powers to sever his hold. As they fly away, Clark tells him to meet him at the Daily Planet, before speeding off towards home. Finding his mother outside with a shovel, he asks where his father was, and Martha explains he was inside and that she hit him, indicating that there was something wrong with him. Wanting to make sure, Clark opens the barn door and heads inside to the sound of banging. He then breaks the lock with his hands and opens the trapdoor to find Jonathan was indeed infected. His father then runs up in a crazed state, trying to infect Clark, but Superman is able to use his superhuman speed to effortlessly dodge and restrain him. Realizing that he couldn't help his father, and that there were many others that still needed him, the unstoppable Man of Steel grabs his father and gently carries him back down. Closing the trapdoor, he then uses his heat vision to solder the lock shut again. For the first time in his life, he wasn't fast enough to save his family. Coming back outside with a somber look on his face, Clark tells his mother that it was time to go. Martha cries that they can't leave as this was their home, and that his father was still there, but Clark explains that he was no longer with them, before gently picking her up and flying her back to the Daily Planet. As we pick up in Washington, D.C., in the deep underground of the Cadmus facility, we're reminded of the old saying, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Of course, we then get DC's biggest hammer wielder, Amanda Waller, who, along with Captain Atom, is observing a restrained infected woman. For a bit of context, Captain Atom, also known as Nathaniel Adam, is the result of a secret government project. The former Air Force officer was framed for a crime he didn't commit and sentenced to death. Avoiding execution, he agreed to participate in a military experiment that would grant him a presidential pardon. And so, to test the durability of a crashed alien spacecraft, a super nuclear bomb was detonated within the hull, while Adam was strapped to it. Not only did Adam survive, but with the alien metal melding with his physiology, he became Captain Atom and was now granted an array of powers that could be described as a microcosm of Dr. Manhattan's abilities, from energy absorption, matter generation, immortality, quantum field manipulation, to an array of other superhuman powers. Responding to Waller, Captain Atom says Ray Palmer is still inside the body of the infected woman, but she tells him that they're out of time. He explains Palmer is shrunk down and is taking a closer look at the virus, reasoning that if you can see the building blocks, they might be able to destabilize it. Not to be confused with Captain Atom, the Atom possesses the power to alter his size to the subatomic level while retaining his natural strength level. He's essentially one of the few heroes in the DC universe that has 100% control over his body on the molecular level, making him exponentially more powerful than he's often portrayed. Waller tells him that they're running out of time and need to move from Protocol B to C. Telling Captain Atom that closed satellite imagery has isolated the worst affected areas, Amanda says that he's up and will be directed through a closed channel. She basically wants him to cull the corrupted using his cosmic powers, but Lois explains that while they hoped to use a hammer to smash the nail of corruption, the issue was that they didn't have a nail. They were dealing with an undead apocalypse, and the military were using a live being of atomic fire, meaning this was never going to end well. As Captain Atom begins freaking out, he tells Amanda that there's something inside of him. We then see Ray moving through Captain Atom's unique bloodstream. We're told they were in the same room, but that Ray was never seen again. The scientists believe Palmer was infected, and that the equation used him to find a way into Captain Atom. A microscopic man seized the heart of a living weapon, and the anti-life equation held one of the biggest hammers we had. Heading over to Metropolis, Clark arrives with Martha as Jonathan asks about his grandfather. With Martha struggling to say that he was gone, the entire family come together and begin to grieve. When Lois tells them that they're ready to broadcast on every analog radio and television channel they can reach, Clark says that he cannot stop and needs to get back out there as people are screaming for help. This is an extremely difficult position for him. While he taught himself at a young age to isolate the sound he heard, the desperation and despair around the world is messing up with his focus. Dinah tells him that he cannot leave, and Ollie explains that they had a chat and all agree. The issue, of course, being that if he were to get infected by looking at a screen, even for a nanosecond, he would be too great of a threat for them to contain. Not really considering the weight of their concern, Clark says that he won't as he's been using X-ray vision since the outbreak. He goes on by explaining that he appreciates their concern, but he's needed, and they don't have time. But Damien, who's quickly beginning to jump into his father's footsteps, pushes back, saying that they need to find more time. He then tells him that they'll be out there somewhere, and they need to find them. And before we can figure out what he means, Dinah agrees and implores Superman that she join him. With the pair flying off, Lois begins an important broadcast, probably the most significant message that people will ever hear. Every single person, whether they be a civilian, hero, or villain, all hear her reassuring words. This is Lois Lane of the Daily Planet in Metropolis. I know the world looks like a nightmare. If you can hear me, I know you're scared, but you're not alone. We are regrouping. The Justice League is gathering in Metropolis. Anyone with the power or means to confront this, please come to the Daily Planet roof if it's safe and you're capable of doing so. And for the first time in what likely felt like forever, people realized they were not alone, and more than that there was still hope. As we're told the call stretched across the world and reached Queens, Mera approaches Queen Hippolyta of Themyscira and explains her city of Atlantis, along with Arthur and the rest of her people, are now gone. Like Clark Kent, she's now the last of her people. Crying, Mera says that she didn't know where else to go as Hippolyta embraces the Queen without a kingdom, exclaiming that she was welcome. We're also notified the message reached goddesses, with Diana Prince listening to the transmission. When her mother asks where she's going, Wonder Woman embraces her warrior spirit and prepares to join the fight. Heading over to Keystone City, we realize Damian had been referring to Barry Allen and Wally West. With Clark spotting the pair sitting down in a secured room, he flies in and breaks the door. Much to his surprise, Wally immediately tells him to wait. He goes on by explaining that Batman contacted both of them the second he understood what anti-life was capable of. And if you remember in our video last week, I mentioned how the reason the Marvel Zombies infection got out of hand was because of Quicksilver, who, after being turned into a zombie, sped across the ocean and infected people in every country. Bruce had essentially anticipated this and told them to hide away from the world. Wally says that he knows it's not very heroic, but he accepts that either one of them getting infected would spell disaster. Bear in mind, these two are not pushovers, but they both respect Bruce so much that they trusted his judgment. Despite this, Dinah tells them that while that was absolutely true, she could use her new Green Lantern powers to safely move them. Back in Gotham, we of course left off with Harley shooting an infected Joker, only for the Birds of Prey to then jump down with anti-Lephetic intent. While she manages to fire a shot off, she runs out of ammo and is saved by the arrival of Poison Ivy, who uses her vines to incapacitate the four of them. Harley then jokingly says that was pretty romantic, and when Ivy asks whether she's referring to the crushing of undead, she responds by saying that saving her life is a romantic part. The zombie crushing was the icing on the cake. Guiding Harley away, Ivy tells her that the Green will protect them. With Lois finishing the tail end of her broadcast, Jonathan uses his superhuman hearing and asks his mother if she heard that. Damian steps in and asks what he's referring to, and John explains it sounds like thunder, as the ground's shaking pulse gets closer. Trying to calm everybody down with a joke, including himself, Ollie states that it sounded like impending doom, a sound he's grown accustomed to as a hero. It's here that John's eyes light up in panic. He tells them that he can see her, as we get a glimpse of an infected Giganta towering over them. The recurring villain of Wonder Woman essentially has the ability to increase her size, and is one of the strongest adversaries she's faced. Realizing they need to keep her away from the building to protect the others, Jefferson fires a bolt in her face as Ollie uses explosive arrows to push her back. Even John flies up and uses heat vision to attack her. With nothing seeming to work, we hear the sound of missiles descending from above as Alfred comes in for the rescue, firing 2 direct shots into each of her eyes with Giga Chad aim. With most of the Bat family, including Batman, Nightwing, Robin, Batgirl, and even Batwoman dead, Damian is his only hope, and Alfred is not going to let anything happen to him. Only problem is, when he fires a few more shots, despite being blind, Giganta hears the Batwing approach and slams into it with her giant fist. Luckily, the heroes arrive in time, and showing us that she's begun to understand how to proficiently use the powers of a Green Lantern, Dinah catches the Batwing with a giant hand, while also carrying and protecting both Wally and Barry at the same time. It's not complex structures, but it's a demonstration of solving multiple problems at the same time, which is not bad for someone who just learned to fly 30 minutes ago. Regardless, Dinah tells Clark to take her down, and using his superhuman strength and speed, he manages to give her a double punch of champions, knocking her to the ground. Wonder Woman then comes out of nowhere and flies down with her sword, ready to deliver a killing blow, but Superman grabs her arm and stops her. Now, this isn't so much his brain, but his emotions taking over. He needs to believe that his father can still be cured, which is why he's doing this. Of course, furious that he held her back, Diana tells him it's an undead giant, and she does not intend on letting it get back up, but Clark tells her that Batman said they were infected. Reasoning there must be a way to cure Giganta and the others, he says there could still be hope, and is about to say they shouldn't give up when they hear a massive explosion below them. Standing in the hole he created in Giganta's gigantic head, when Superman asks what he just did, Victor tells him that she wasn't alive. He then says that none of them were, before saying they need to talk. With Dinah gently placing the jet down, wondering if it could be possible, Damian calls out for his father to see Alfred appear with a briefcase saying that he was sorry. Opening it up, he reveals a batsuit and some pretty cool equipment to help him embrace the darkness, before saying, "He said you were worthy of it, that he was proud of you, and that he should have told you that every day." With Damian breaking down, Alfred gives him a hug. But I also want you to pay close attention to the 4 flash drives, one for each of the main members of the Justice League, including Flash, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and Superman. At the same time, I want to bring your attention back to the Tower of Babel storyline we briefly discussed last week, in which Batman had created safeguards in place to take them down. We're going to learn that Top B is the same in every universe, and that they're going to be thankful he is. Even from the grave, he'll be taking everybody to school by preparing for the worst. Jefferson's eldest daughter Anissa then hands contacts over to Barry and Wally, as her father explains they will make everything blurry if they need to use their super speed. While not great, with him explaining, it will likely give them a bad headache. It's a temporary solution that will stop them from turning into a zombie. It's here that Victor jumps in to say that they're not zombies, but a blight, an extension of the anti-life equation. He goes on to explain the blighted ones want to spread death, and they will search for life. This means if they can sense it, they will eventually find life and end it. He goes on to say that they can't stay here, as they will continue to attack, but he doesn't know the half of it. As they all look up, they can see Hawkgirl plummeting down to them, with her wings in flames. Diana quickly flies up to catch her, and Kendra tells them that she heard the call and was on her way to the Daily Planet when she stumbled onto Captain Atom, who was infected and about to self-destruct. With Clark asking where, we cut to DC and are told the anti-life equation controlled a man of atomic fire. With Clark and Diana flying over as quickly as they could, it's explained that we had a warrior goddess and a man of steel from the stars. They'd always protected us, always saved the day. They would take him up and away. As the pair grab either one of his arms, not knowing if they were going to survive the explosion, they began to fly up, hoping they could at least take him out to space. But it was too late. It was the most destructive explosion ever unleashed on the world. It was heard and felt across the planet. Washington was instantly gone, and the blast kept growing. Baltimore crumbled, and finally, the last nail was Metropolis. After demolishing multiple cities, much to everyone's horror, they all look on as the massive blast moves in to envelop everyone on the roof of the Daily Planet. As the end moves closer, Lois held both Damien and John close, as Jefferson did the same with his daughters, telling them to close their eyes and hold on to him. With the blast consuming everyone, we're told Amanda Waller's hammer finally came down. In the aftermath of the detonation, we're told Superman and Wonder Woman had protected them so many times. No matter how dark it became, they were an emblem of hope, but even they could not protect them from the catastrophe. 3 cities are instantly vaporized, and their millions of inhabitants, both living and blighted, now gone. With the pair turning around and flying back, we can see Dinah was able to create a protective construct around the top half of the building, saving everyone that was on the roof of the Daily Planet. Though grateful to be alive, they're all ashamed that they didn't do enough for everyone else. Testing the patience of Clark, who, mind you, literally turned into a tyrannical menace in the Injustice series after the Joker had orchestrated the destruction of Metropolis, who should then appear but Lex Luthor in his war suit. The circumstances are different here, but Clark is furious that of all the people that survived, it was Lex Luthor. With Clark seconds away from incinerating him with heat fission, Lex tells him that he wants a truce. Explaining he's not here to fight, he's about to say that he's not here to add to the destruction when he collapses to his knees, broken that their city was no more. Taking the advice of Batman, the Justice League took the internet down over the next few days. Every major server and mass digital broadcasting device was destroyed. They had to essentially sever everything they'd relied on for so many years. Now the only way for the virus to spread was through people. While this does contain the spread, anti-life has a will of its own, and we're going to find out that there is no place that is safe. We learn that 2 major sanctuaries were established by the Justice League, the first being on Themyscira, and while her mother and the Amazonians were hesitant, stating that they'd never allowed man's world to set foot on the island, Diana convinces them that soon there won't be much of man's world left. More than just a humanitarian issue, she rightfully points out that there will eventually be the only untouched place left on the Earth, with nothing but death and the inevitable closing in from all sides. And so, after convincing her people that they're supposed to be protectors, Diana, Clark and Mera begin lifting parts of the seafloor and merging it with the island. The other major sanctuary is the Gotham Jungle, which grew over a week and created thick walls that prevented the infected from getting through. Standing at the entrance are Dinah, Damien and Ollie, looking at the display of infected that were caught in the live wall of thorns. Making his father proud, Damien tells him that he will do the talking once they get in. This is part cockiness, sure, but he knows how much Ivy hates humanity, which is why when Ollie points out that he's not a people's person, Damien responds by saying Ivy's not exactly people. He's also aware that Ivy and Harley have a soft spot for children, so him taking the lead is likely to make them less defensive. It should be noted that Dinah and Ivy are acquaintances, but given she's now a Green Lantern bound to their code, she may as well be a stranger to her. But before they can get inside, Killer Croc breaks free of the vines that were containing him and attacks them. Damien throws a couple of batarangs and Ollie lets off a few shots, but it's ultimately branches coming out of the wall that end him. The pair are then seized by the vines, but when Ollie tells Dinah to cut them down, Damien warns her not to harm the plant. Making fun of his outfit, Ivy appears and asks why Robin is dressed as a tiny Batman, and Damien tells her that Batman is gone. Saying that she's sorry, she then lets the pair down. When he explains that they're looking for a sanctuary to place survivors, it's actually revealed that Harley's been nagging her to help others, saying that she knows she has empathy blooming in her heart. When Harley tells her that she'll stop nagging when Ivy becomes a benevolent jungle queen, Ivy tells him that there will have to be rules. The fruit of the green can be eaten as the green wills it, but if any human harms the green, they'll be expelled and fed to the monsters. Though Ollie points out that seemed a bit harsh, knowing that they had no other choice, Damien says that they agree to her terms. Heading over to the Fortress of Solitude, we're told that Cyborg and Luther were able to engineer close communications and turn the place into a new information hub, one where all the remaining heroes were coming up with a plan. Hilariously, Luther tells Victor what they accomplished together was quite impressive, asking why they'd never worked together in the past, causing Vic to explain it was because Lex kept trying to kill them all. Luther then jokes that is fair, but in his defense, that was before he realized he could be useful. With Ollie asking what they're working on, Cyborg explains they've created plans to build interstellar arcs. Luther continues that they're capable of fitting 7 million people, but Clark is adamant they're not leaving. Getting a bit cocky, Luther asks for confirmation that Batman is dead, and when Victor tells him that's true, he explains that now meant he was now the most intelligent person on the planet, one that is determined that the world is over, or at least that the end is inevitable. He believes if the human race is to survive, it must leave the Earth, but Clark yells back that they're not abandoning the planet and must fight for it. Putting a hand on his shoulder, Martha suggests it might be the only way, but Superman refuses to believe this is so. With Luther recklessly joking that he would lose 2 homeworlds due to carelessness, he's punched in the face by Lois, who tells him that if he opens his mouth and speaks ill of her husband again, she will smash it closed. Seeing a puzzled look and smile from the boys, she turns around and says that violence is never the answer, in a classic parental case of do what I say, not what I do. Of course, John looks over to Damien and says it looked like a pretty good answer just then. In a massive coordinated effort, all the heroes and villains work together over the next few weeks to locate survivors and bring them to Themyscira and Gotham Jungle, where the 2 massive arcs were being created. Importantly, for the first time, they took a moment to talk and to grieve and felt like they were in control. Unfortunately for everyone, Taylor is going to start a catastrophic chain reaction that cannot be undone. As Lois explains they were never in control, it's revealed their biggest mistake was bringing all the heroes and villains together. What began as a buzz then grew to a scream in their minds that made them writhe in pain. The scream was then followed by invisible death, with something cutting Lex in half. The thing is moving so quickly that not even Barry Allen was able to get out of the way. Before they knew what happened, an infected Martian Manhunter sped in and tore into its back, infecting him. And it is all downhill from here. Firestorm immediately tells everyone to move and incinerates Martian Manhunter as Dinah and Jefferson held him back, turning him into a pile of ash. Just as Batman had feared, Barry is infected. Worse than that, as the others look over to the charred remains of the Manhunter, Wally realizes his friend has disappeared. It is threat level midnight, and when Superman uses his unmatched perspicacity to locate him as he ran away into the distance, Wally offers to chase him, but Clark gets in front of him and says no, warning that if there were 2 infected speedsters, they would not stand a chance. Offering to go himself, he's asked by Ollie if he thinks he can catch him, and responds that he can't. This is a nightmare scenario, with Flash finding the remaining survivors that were traveling to the sanctuaries and infecting them before they knew what happened. We're told it's hard to explain how quickly someone moving at super speed can infect the world, and what it would be like to imagine death spreading faster than the speed of sound. Flying off into space, Clark asks Victor if Flash is dead, and is told that he is. He then gets him to promise something that we don't hear, before explaining he doesn't have to catch up to Barry. Instead, he plans on meeting him on the other side, and so the Man of Steel speeds off to intercept the Flash before he can do more damage. Attacking him head-on, Clark flies right into his friend, cutting him in half. With Superman apologizing for what he did, we're told that they found out that day what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. They merge. And as Clark looks down, he can see parts of Barry sticking out of his abdomen. Without a second to spare, Clark speeds off back to the Fortress of Solitude. Lois tells us that she didn't know how long Superman had. His body could fight the infection longer than the others, but they still weren't sure. She then wondered how long it seemed to him, a man that could move at incredible speeds. Managing to race across the world, he arrives and tells Wally that he's sorry that Barry's gone. As Wally looks at his injuries in shock, Clark then confirms that he too is also gone. Wasting no time, he tells him that he needs Wally to connect Lois, Martha and John to the Speed Force as a last resort if the arc should fail. Heading over to his family, he's met with sadness and confusion, for everyone thought he was supposed to be immortal. Looking at his mother, he says, "Thank you for finding me, for raising me, for teaching me, for giving me your name, your values, and your empathy. My world ended, and you and Pa gave me another one." As he glances over at Lois, he tells her that he absolutely has no regrets, and that he doesn't know how he got so lucky. "I crossed an ocean of stars, and somehow I found you. Thank you for choosing me." As they both cry, she also thanks him for choosing her. Finally looking over to his son, he says, "John, I know things look dark, but you're the light. You're the hope. You're gonna change the universe. I know it. No pressure. Just keep helping. You'll make mistakes. You will fail sometimes. But I will always be proud of you. I've seen so much of the universe. You're the best thing in it. I'm sure you've already noticed this is a combination of the advice Clark received from both Jor-El and Jonathan Kent, and he's essentially passing the flame on to his little boy, in the same way that Batman entrusted his son with his responsibilities. And like I said in the last video, Jonathan does not disappoint. After thanking his family for being his world, we're told that Clark tried his best to leave, to get as far away from Earth as he could, to starve himself of oxygen before the virus took over. But it was too late. Her husband was gone, and any hope their world had was now gone with him. As a last tear fell from his face, it was replaced by an uncontrollable lust to corrupt. Their greatest ally had now become their greatest foe. Not only this, but an incoming attack by the corrupted on the two sanctuaries is going to put humanity on the brink of annihilation. We are going to find out just how much damage Clark can do when his nigh unstoppable powers are not tempered by morality, love, and compassion. They haven't just lost the strongest being in the universe and a symbol for what it means to be the best of humanity, but now also hope. And that is the next part of DCeased. Tom Taylor does an amazing job here, and things are only going to get crazier with Superman now infected. The anti-life equation has made its way across the world, infecting billions of people, and while a plan was developed to create 2 interstellar arcs that could carry a few million people in a mass exodus in the last volume, Superman was corrupted. Their greatest ally had now become their greatest foe, and things are about to get crazy. As we head to 432 Park Avenue, New York, we're informed what happened next. He was faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. But Clark had a much greater power. Every single person that saw him is filled with hope. We then cut to the roof where a number of survivors are looking up to who they thought was their savior. All hope was lost at 11:48 a.m. It was a Wednesday. Without hesitation, the corrupted Superman flew down and used a combination of his powers to locate the non-infected, corrupt them, while simultaneously bringing the building down within seconds. Naturally, everyone that is aware of this is starting to freak out. Clark is able to hear and see everything within an extended range, and with his super speed and powers, it won't be long until he single-handedly brings the world to its knees. As we head over to the Fortress of Solitude, Cyborg alerts them all to the severity of their predicament. He believes that as Superman has turned, any chance of reversing the infection is gone with him, and since the arcs are ready, they need to leave Earth now. Agreeing with him, Lois notes that Clark can take down both arcs in a heartbeat, and Diana tells him that they need to take him on. With Jefferson asking how they plan on doing that, Damian reveals one of the flash drives Batman left in his care, explaining that Bruce left a takedown plan for every major hero. Not surprised by this, Ollie tells him that Bruce doesn't even have to be alive to be scheming against them all, but Damian admits that he didn't actually leave one for him. Discovering that Batman never saw him as a world-ending threat like Wonder Woman, Flash, and the Green Lantern, Ollie is a bit offended, causing Dinah to jokingly agree that he could be a planetary threat if he wanted to. Alfred then advises Damian that Bruce stocked up his new inventory belt with something special. Sensing its effect on him, with his friend pulling it out of his right hip pocket, John notes that he's holding kryptonite. Alfred and Cyborg then open the flash drive, explaining that schematics would enable them to turn the kryptonite into a suppressing gas that would slow Clark down, but Diana tells them that's not enough. Damian tries to say that they should trust his father, but Diana brings up a great point, that Bruce was a lot of things, but he was never lethal. The trait that made him admirable was arguably his biggest flaw. After all, a case could be made that Gotham would be much safer if he killed his rogues gallery, instead of sending them to Arkham. Diana then pushes on, saying they can't hold back now. When asked if she had a better solution, she explains that Batman wasn't the only one with enough sense to plot against his friends. Taking the leadership role of Superman, she begins formulating a plan, sending the heroes to begin the evacuation with one arc to retrieve the survivors at Themyscira and the other for survivors at Gotham. As we head over to the Forge of Kal-El, Diana begins constructing a weapon that could defeat the Man of Steel. With Victor asking if this will work, Wonder Woman says, Clark is vulnerable to kryptonite and magic. Years ago, my mother and I hypothesized we could join the two. This is the sword of Athena. Athena was the goddess of war, and we fight for everything. She was the goddess of craft, and we have fused mythology with an element from a world that no longer exists. Last, she was the goddess of mathematics, and we are fighting an equation. As the trio fly off looking for Superman, she tells them, "This is not a coincidence. I believe I hold fate in my hands." Heading over to Mr. Miracle and Big Barda, who, under the request of Superman, were told to look for Cyborg on Apokolips, we find them arriving to where the planet should be. Finding nothing but rubble, Barda looks on and says that the rumors were true, and that the entire planet, along with its god, were now dead. Given Darkseid had raided the Earth at the beginning of the story and infected Cyborg, as far as they're concerned, there now is no way to end the corruption. Importantly, Scot-free is a bit torn by the revelation that his stepfather was now gone. Two things to note here. Darkseid, of course, is not dead, and we're going to find out what happens to him in DCeased Dead Planet. But it's also crucial to know the reason he's so conflicted is that Scott is actually the son of Isaiah Highfather, the ruler of New Genesis, and his wife Avia. As part of a diplomatic move to stop the destructive war between New Genesis and the planet Apocalypse, Highfather agreed to an exchange of heirs with Darkseid. His son Scott was traded for Darkseid's second-born son Orion, and the exchange of heirs as hostages was supposed to guarantee that neither side would attack the other. While Orion became a superhero under the loving tutelage of Highfather, Scott was imprisoned on Apocalypse and developed the astonishing ability to break out of any dungeon Darkseid made to contain him. Despite this, he learnt much from his adoptive father, so to learn that he is gone is a bit of a shock. But after having processed the information, when Bada asks how he feels about the presumed death of Darkseid, he tells her that it honestly feels pretty good. And presuming there was nothing more they could learn here, they head back to Earth, where we meet up with Mr. Terrific, who's experimenting with an infected Captain Boomerang, noting there was no response to audible or visual stimuli, and no reaction to touch or pain. He also points out a secondary exposure to the virus also had no effect on the subject. After analysing the virus code, he can't find any flaw to exploit, and is worried what effects of tampering with the virus would be. For example, any cure that he thought he created could just amplify the effects of the anti-life corruption. He had 14 PhDs, and is stumped as to how they should proceed. While contemplating the results, he gets a notification that 2 unique signatures have reappeared back on Earth, causing him to stop what he's doing and fly over to the location. We then head over to the home of Scot-free and Big Barda, who are cautiously looking at the door, where someone appears to be knocking. The dilemma here, of course, being that what appears to be knocking could simply be the infected mindlessly shuffling through the corridor. But when the door begins to ring, they open it to reveal Mr. Terrific outside. When Barda asks what he's doing here, he explains he was tracking the planet for technology that originated from Apocalypse when he got a spike. As he sits down, he tells the pair that he's done a thorough investigation on the virus. Scott is puzzled to hear this, asking how he was able to see it considering viewing it infected others, and is informed the T-Mask protected him. What's amazing to hear is that despite his intelligence, he didn't know if he would survive, and that he was in fact extremely lucky to do so. He also reveals that he came to them as he hoped they would take him to Apocalypse, reasoning they would have a better chance if they could find exactly where anti-life originated from, but is told that the planet was no more. Taking the information in, he suggests that they move on to other plans he had formulated. Looking for Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, the trio break into Cord Industries and wipe out most of the infected surrounding the compound. After agreeing to clean up, Mr. Terrific informs the group that they need to save the world, and that the only way to do this was to think outside of the box. As they fly off to the side of millions of infected below them, Barda asks if this is really the end of the world. I mean, for the most part, if there is a problem, while there may be significant casualties, as was the case in the death of Superman, the overall threat is usually contained, but here it appears as though all hope is lost. Mr. Terrific explains that he hopes they still have a say in the outcome, and when Barda questions if they really do, he reveals the answer lies in England. They are completely unaware of the evacuation effort, and are focused entirely on reversing the anti-life corruption. When Booster Gold asks why they don't reach out to the Justice League, Mr. Terrific tells them that they're a powder keg, before asking if they really want to be near them when the infection takes over someone like Wonder Woman, something Booster agrees would be a nightmare. And with Superman now infected, we know this is a big brain move. He continues telling them that since the origin of the virus was gone, they are no longer able to attack anti-life from a scientific or technological front. The fall of Captain Atom and the destruction left in his wake is a testament to this. With that said, he reasons that their next option is magic. Blue Beetle then posits that magic is extremely unreliable, which means they will need a backup plan if it fails. Looking down, Mr. Terrific reveals there's a third option, but one that could end very badly. He then goes on to say that he preferred not to think about that option, as it put time and space at risk. Picking up at Liverpool a few hours later, John Constantine is having a rough day. Not only is everyone outside infected, but he was forced to incinerate his best friend. Although he's surrounded by an endless number of corrupted, the group arrive from above and roast them. While thankful they came to his aid, John has a way with words and begins roasting the group for their silly names. He's also a bit confused how they found him, leading to Mr. Terrific explaining his Justice League membership in his wallet had a transponder inside. No doubt the work of Bruce, who, once again, is taking everyone to school from the grave. Getting serious, he tells John that they were unable to find a technological fix for anti-life, hoping there was a magical solution. But John jokes about how they think a warlock can just click his fingers and make Armageddon disappear, for somberly telling them that he had tried to fix it, but this was also beyond magic. When asked if he was going to help them, he reveals his plan is to hide and get so drunk that he won't feel anything, reverting back to his self-destructive ways. Knowing that John was better than that, Mr. Terrific offers a tether towards redemption by saying he knows how to find them if he changes his mind. Flying away and seeing the magician step into a portal and vanish, Mr. Terrific explains it was time for the third and final option, the one that would risk all of time and space. When Booster Gold asks him what it was, he points towards him and says that he believed he was the only one that could save humanity. Not processing what he meant, Booster jokes that he was supposed to be a great thinker, but Mr. Terrific counters this by revealing he had a time machine. It's here that Booster Gold admits he stole it, and of course we know from his character history that he's actually from the 25th century and had come back in time to become a superhero, a plot point that becomes critical very shortly. After telling them that he knew how to operate the machine, when his best friend asks him where it was, he tells them it's in safe hands. As they make their way over to Malibu, the home of superheroes Fire and Ice, they notice the aftermath of a huge conflict. When Barda looks down and tells them it looks like they fought hard, Scott calls out to Teddy in fear, as Beatrice DaCosta flies up to them and uses her fiery powers to bring the Beetle crashing down. Although they survive the crash, they stumble onto a house of horrors, with hundreds of infected scrambling out. Giving the others time to reach the machine, Barda and Scott confront the corrupted, but are soon overpowered by the dual attacks of Fire and Ice. Importantly, they acknowledge that they could survive by escaping as they'd always done on Apocalypse, but doing so would mean the past would stay the same, and the world would die. And so, they keep fighting, buying the others more time. Unfortunately, when they reach the machine, they're confronted by Wave Rider, the Master of Time, who explains Michael Carter was under arrest and that the machine would be confiscated. But before he can finish his sentence, John steps out of a portal and says, "Oi, take a good look, Sparkleface. Can you see my future?" And when the Master of Time admits that he cannot, a result of John's magic, John extends his hand and tells him to watch closely, as he was going to demonstrate misdirection. And with that, pulling Wave Rider in, he breaks his nose, before joking that the Time Lord didn't see that coming. While Booster is in awe, Mr. Terrific smiles, telling him that he knew that John would eventually come through. The only problem is, the infected are making their way to them, and who should break through the wall but Big Barda? Crazed with anti-Lephetic intent, Barda jumps onto John and is kicked off by Mr. Terrific, who knows that he and Booster are now the two most important people in this mission. Unfortunately, while he saves his friend, Barda jumps on top of him. Much to everyone's horror, she literally tears him in half. Not only this, but with Booster moving over to the time machine, he's overcome by a weird sensation that he was being written out of history. As he collapses to the ground, Wave Rider explains it is as it should be, and that they're experiencing the end. Kal-El had just found Barry Allen. The future had been irrevocably changed, and the one that Booster Gold came from was now gone, meaning that he was also never born. Blue Beetle then falls to his knees, broken that his best friend was not just dead, but whacked from time and space itself. But he doesn't even have a chance to grieve, as Barda comes in and knocks him down, and just like that, another one bites the dust. With the corrupted beginning to close in on Wave Rider and John, the Time Lord looks back and says it's time for him to go. But John is not letting him off that easily. He is furious that he thinks he can just walk away from the timeline he was supposed to protect. Wave Rider admits he's far from happy and is about to disappear into the time stream, saying goodbye and how he wasn't sure if they would meet again, but John grabs him by the hand, binding them together. Despite Wave Rider's plea to let him go, John tells him that he's stuck here with him and that he can see their future. Moreover, it's a very short one. And just like that, an infected Blue Beetle takes the head of the Time Lord as more infected closed in. But before they can reach him, Dr. Fate and Zatanna suddenly appear, creating protective flames that incinerate any of the infected that approach. Sticking his hand out, Dr. Fate tells him that it's not his time and that another fate awaited him. But John is furious that everyone he cared about is gone. After nearly breaking his hand punching the helmet, he asks why he's being spared while the actual heroes had to die. And all that Dr. Fate can say is that he's sorry, but that was their fate. He goes on to explain that the world was ending and that they needed to prepare for the Lords of Chaos and Order, but exclaiming that he didn't believe in destiny as it took all the human out of living. John defiantly tells them that the world isn't over until he said it was. With everything hanging on the edge, we head back to Gotham Jungle. They had a day. Less than a day. The two arcs could hold a maximum of 7 million, but with Clark going on an unstoppable rampage, they knew that they wouldn't be able to fill them up to maximum capacity. Worse still, there were so many others that were being left behind. After helping to load the remaining passengers on board, Wally heads over to Damien, who Diana left in charge of the evacuation in Gotham. This is a huge responsibility, but she knows he had a utilitarian mindset and could be trusted to make the hard decision, and we see this come into play. Wally tells him that they have 6,004,709 people on board, and Damien tells him that it's time for them to go. We also learn that Ivy has decided not to abandon the Green, along with Harley. We then head over to Themyscira, shortly before this, where the launch is on its final legs. With the heroes making final preparations, they notice a storm in the ocean that is moving towards the island. While the others are confused, Mera advises Queen Hippolyta to move the evacuation to high ground and ready the warriors around the Ark. When the Queen asks if it was merely a storm, Mera's eyes light up in fear as she tells her it was a tempest. Much to everyone's horror, Arthur emerges from the ocean riding the Kraken, with nothing but hate in his eyes. With his army of infected making their way to the shore, I want you to bear in mind that the Kraken isn't actually corrupted. Aquaman is merely exerting his influence over the beast. This is critical to note, as just when it seems as though he's about to wipe out their ground forces and even destroy the Ark, Ollie fires an amazing shot into Arthur's eye, killing him. And with his influence over the creature now gone, the Kraken decides to pull back. Still salty about Batman not classifying him as a planetary threat, Ollie says that he fired an arrow half a mile through raging winds into the brain of the undead King of the Sea, before jokingly cursing Batman under his breath. With Mera doing her best to hold them off while they brought in reinforcements, it's explained that the infected shouldn't have been able to set foot on Paradise Island. In fact, they shouldn't have been able to find it. But when they raised the seafloor and extended the island, Themyscira was no longer hidden. A wave of monsters came from the sea, where it broke against two warrior queens. Of course, they weren't alone, and we see Antiope and Wonder Girl jumping into the conflict, along with the rest of the Amazons, giving the last of the survivors a chance to board the Ark. Half a world away in New York City, Clark isn't just infecting people, but tearing everything to shreds. With Wonder Woman, Dinah and Victor flying over to his location, they note that he wasn't hard to find. Dinah then asks if anyone was alive down there, and Cyborg furiously tells her there were no signs of life anywhere in the city. Getting this confirmation, she notifies the pair this meant that she didn't have to hold back. And so, creating a massive megaphone construct, she directs an ultrasonic scream directly towards Superman, momentarily incapacitating him. And while Clark fell to his knees in agony, remember, he has the ability to fine-tune the sound that he focuses on, meaning he is seconds away from bouncing back. Over on the island, things are getting frantic, with the Amazons outnumbered by the endless supply of corrupted coming from the ocean, and the startling fact that each one of their own that fell were also transforming into monsters. They were the fiercest warriors on the planet. They had trained and battled together for thousands of years, beaten myths and legends, giants and gods, but nothing could prepare them for this. With the last of the survivors on board, Ollie tells the heroes they need to leave. As he calls on Mera to join them, she jumps in and looks back, realizing there was no way to extract what was left of the Amazons without putting the Ark in grave danger. While Hippolyta and Wonder Girl tear through the infected making their way out of the water, seeing a bit of her daughter in her, the Queen tells Cassie that it was time for her to leave. Although Wonder Girl is reluctant, Hippolyta hands the crown over to Cassie, begging her to tell Diana that the promise of Themyscira is hers to honor now. As Wonder Girl flies up to escort the Ark, we're told that the Amazons stayed so that millions could leave. They died fighting for humanity, with Paradise holding off oblivion. As we head over to a ruined city, the trio are told that while the Amazons had fallen, along with the many other heroes, the Arks have finally taken off. Superman has also managed to overcome the ultrasonic wave and flies up to destroy the construct, and Dinah along with it. Knowing Clark would easily smash through, Cyborg tries to hold him back with an energy blast. While Diana comes in for the rescue and is able to slice off his right arm just as he tore through the construct, Lois tells us that our defenders did so much to protect us. They risked everything. And though she was able to catch him by surprise with another attack and stab him in the chest, Diana should have gone for the head as they were up against so much power. Although the power was familiar, its motivation was not. This power came without hesitation, and just like that, Superman uses his left hand to punch a hole in Wonder Woman, mortally wounding her, while simultaneously dooming her to anti-life corruption. As Diana falls to the ground with a sword in hand, we're reminded that Clark's power now came without remorse, and while they bought us time, that was all they could do. We then see Clark speed off into the sky. As Cyborg catches Diana, she tells them that they know where he's going and what they must do. He's essentially heading straight for the Arks, and they have no time to spare. With the dying Wonder Woman handing the sword over to Dinah, Victor explains that he will stay with her until she turns. The Green Lantern tries to argue with him, but feeling guilty for bringing this plague upon mankind and knowing he was still a carrier, he decides to stay behind. While this seems like a logical choice, we're going to find out that he's making a huge mistake. With the two Arks making their way out of the atmosphere, John uses his supervision to spot a monster coming to annihilate the Exodus. Without fear or hesitation, he calmly tells Damien that his dad was coming towards them, but his friend reminds him that's no longer his father. When Damien asks if there's anything he can do for him, John tells him to look after his mother before hugging his friend and telling him he's going to be a great Batman. Lois explains that she never wanted her son to be a hero. We're supposed to protect our children, We're the ones who were supposed to fight for their future, but he was the only one that could fight for theirs. Sad that she would also be losing her son, she approaches him to see if he was up for the task, and just like his father, he simply smiles and tells her it's okay and that he knew what he had to do, before revealing his Superboy costume. John was the only one standing between the last survivors of Earth and extinction. Speeding off to meet his father head-on, we're told that Clark would have been so proud of him, and with that, father and son collided in an explosion that would be felt light years away. John did amazing, but he was just a child trying to hold back death. His son was not able to stop that, but he had brought them one precious moment that would change everything. With the infected Superman coming to and about to tear his unconscious boy to shreds, Dinah arrives with the sword of Athena in hand, and in that minute, she gets the best news possible. The cavalry had finally arrived. As she looks back confused to see Guy Gardner, we see the full might of the Green Lantern Corps coming in for the assist. Ganthet explains that the Guardians were about to quarantine the Earth, as Guy looks on at the infected Clark, who has not moved since they arrived. Dinah tells them that it's thinking, working out if he can take them all on, before yelling at the anti-life equation to do the math. In that moment, the anti-life equation made a choice. As Superman speeds off into the sun with the Green Lanterns in tow, we're told that it couldn't stand against the entire Corps, so it calculated another way to ensure it survived and continued to kill. With Clark entering the center of the sun, they're told to hold back as Ganthet explains Clark is feeding on solar radiation, essentially absorbing and draining the sun of its energy to transform into something even more horrifying. Realizing they could do nothing, he tells them this meant the entire solar system would soon grow cold and die, meaning they literally had no choice but to leave the Earth forever. Of course, Dinah and the others want to finish Clark off, but are informed that even the Green Lantern's light isn't powerful enough to reach into the heart of a star, leading the others to pull back and support the Arcs. He tells the Green Lanterns perhaps it's for the best. They cannot directly wipe the virus out, but if the system freezes, at least anti-life will sleep. Saying they will have to continue to monitor the solar system from afar, he explains their priority is taking what's left of humanity to a new world. As we return to Earth, Cyborg confronts Diana, who was just corrupted by anti-life. Binding her with the lasso of truth, he compels her to speak. To his surprise, Anti-Life begins talking through Wonder Woman, saying, "We have a voice." He continues by asking if there was a way to stop them, but is told that they are death, and that nothing can stop death. Importantly, when Cyborg then asks if there's a cure, he's surprised to hear the virus say that there was. When he presses on what the cure was and where he could find it, Diana tries to resist, but Cyborg screams at her to reveal the truth, causing her to ultimately say that the cure was inside him all along. She continues that he's man and machine, binary off and on, patient zero and the one, the alpha and the omega. Victor then lets his guard down, shocked by the revelation that everyone they fought and killed didn't have to die. The voice assures him that everybody dies, and when he lets go of the lasso and looks up at the sky, stating that he had to fly up and let everyone know the truth, Diana approaches him from behind, and before he had time to do anything, she grabs his head and pulls it off, saying that the only truth is that life is fleeting and death is forever. Just like that, a hope we didn't know we had was extinguished by anti-Lephetic degeneracy. As the Arcs reach a new home world dubbed Earth 2, Lois reminds us that although her mother used to say that there was no such thing as monsters, nothing hidden in the dark that would be jumping out of the shadows, her son came to realize the hard way that was not true. But as they looked onto their new planet for the first time, she tells us that there was one thing she did know. The monsters were certainly behind them now. And that is the conclusion to DCeased. This was so much fun to go through, so a huge thanks to everyone that requested we cover it. With that said, let me know what your favourite parts of the story were, and what surprised you the most in the comments below. Well, that's all for today, folks. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay up to date on all my content, and if there's anything else you'd like to request, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.